What's up, K-Divas, and welcome back to another sewing vlog. This one is in collaboration with Jennifer of Above and Beyond Design.
So I'm so excited to be showing you guys what we create and how we style it. We're going to be using the same fabric, but we're going to be creating two different designs, pants, you know, and then we're going to have a video at the end of how we styled it and everything. So if you want to see how that turned out, keep watching.
Now, back in 2021, we decided to actually work on a project where we made matching pair of trousers. We could really decide on the style, but the deal was to use the same fabric. And I'm going to be using Ankara to make a pair of boot cut trousers. I don't think I've ever done like a boot cut flare style on my channel. I've done one that had the gathering around the knee. I've done like a wide leg. I've done a palazzo. So I thought it was about time I did a boot cut. So I'm going to be sharing how to create the pattern, how to cut and sew the piece. And you guys need to check out Jennifer's own version. I'm going to leave links to her YouTube, her Instagram down below. And let us know which style or which cut you prefer better. I think it's really fun to do projects like this because you really get to see how people come up with their own iteration of like a similar concept. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know your comments, thoughts and ideas down below, and let's get into the tutorial. The fabric I'm going to be working with is this red, green, blue and white Ankara fabric. I have a total of 2 meters here to make my trouser. In combination with that, I have some simple black lining. I have 2 meters as well, and then I also got a black short invisible zip. This one I have here is about 12 inches long because I ended up putting it on the center back of the trouser. Now that we have all the materials out of the way, the measurements that you're going to be needing to create this pattern are listed here on the screen. If you already have a basic trouser pattern, you can just go ahead to adapt the bottom of the pattern to add the flares. You can also try the slash and spread method if you want more volume, but I'm just going to be making this pattern from scratch so you guys can see how it works and you can follow along if you want to. Starting with the front trouser, I have some paper here, and with my long metal ruler, I'm going to be drawing a long vertical line. This is going to become my side seam line or guide. And once I have that marked there, from the top, I'm going to be marking the vertical distance from the waist to the hip, and then from the waist to the crouch depth. I'm going in to square these lines across because that way I'm able to mark the quarter measurements along these lines. So I'm just going in to draw my hip line across like so, and then my crouch depth line, which is the distance from your waist to where your butt hits the seat. You take this measurement seated. Now along the waistline, I'm marking a quarter of my waist measurement plus 1 inch for my waist dart, and I just marked away my dart at the middle point of my waistline, so marking 1/2 inch on both sides of that middle point of my waistline. Now my dart on the front is 5 inches long, and that I am drawing in like so, with the middle indicating point like this, and then the side point where I'm going to be stitching away from. Now that I have that in place, I'm going to my hip line to mark a quarter of my hip measurement. You can add 1/2 inch ease if you want the fit to be more relaxed on your body, but for the crouch line, I am marking a quarter of my hip measurement plus 2 inches, so it adds and gives enough room for movement when I have the trouser on. This I'm connecting with a curved line, a curved angle like so, and then I'm going to be drawing in the center front edge like this. To shape the waistline, I'm going to be raising the waist by 1/2 inch and then marking 1/2 inch inwards, because the plan is to curve in the side in like this and then lift the outer edge of the waistline like so. This just allows for a more natural fit, if I can say so, natural fit around the waist. But before you go ahead, I always recommend to double check that your measurements work and they fit. This is the point that you can add any extra if you want to. I decided to add 1/2 inch on the center front edge because I just wanted just a little more ease along the waistline. You can have a super tailored fit if you want to, but I know my fabric doesn't have stretch, so I'd rather just have ease and be able to breathe in my outfit when it's done. So now that I have this top half of the trouser planned in place, I'm going to go in to mark the vertical distance from my waist to my knee, because I want the shaping of the trouser to flare out from the knee. So I'm just marking that across like so, and I'm going to be squaring that point across so I have a horizontal line to plan my design from. And then I'm going to be marking inwards along that knee by 1/2 inch, so it curves in a little bit before it flares out. And then on my around knee measurement, I'm just marking 1/2 of that because we're only planning one leg of the trouser at this point. And I'm just going in to draw the inner leg seam on this side, and then I'm going to draw the outer leg seam that curves in around the knee, and then it goes out to the hip and flares out to the hem. Now I'm marking my full trouser length, which was about 40 inches. You can make yours longer if you really want that touching the ground fit, but I know I'm going to be wearing this trouser with flats, so I just wanted something that I could wear with flats as well. Now I'm just going in here to flare out the trouser from around the knee. This I will do on the outer and the inner leg. The hemline width itself is 15 inches. You can go wider if you want, and you can achieve this flare by slashing and spreading the bottom half of a regular trouser pattern if you want to control the volume. I just wanted to do it as a very simple, straightforward way so you guys get the general gist of what the bottom of flared pants look like. Now, because of the way the trouser is flared out, I actually went in to lift up the outer leg edge by about 1/2 inch. And that way, when you have the trouser on and you stand, you don't have a situation whereby the inner leg is shorter than the outer leg. This will make sense when you put on the trouser and when you see the finished fit at the end. After making that change at the bottom, I went in to add a 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around my front. And this is what my front trouser pattern is looking like. I added my grain line, annotations, and I'm just going in to cut out the pattern because I'm going to need this pattern to make my back trouser. Here is a closer look of the hemline. As I mentioned earlier on, you can see on that outer leg it is lifted up slightly to allow for a better and more relaxed fit around the hem of the trouser. Once I am done with that front, I'm going to go ahead to work on the back. First, on that front pattern, I'm going to find the midpoint between the waistline and the hip line, and then mark a point there and draw a horizontal line. And along this line, I'm going to be slashing and spreading to add a bit of room along that center front edge on my back pattern. Now I'm just going to cut this out first and then set it aside, cut out pattern paper and layer that underneath. And on this pattern paper, we're going to be creating the back trouser. Now on that slash and spread point, I'm just going to put down some weight and add tape, but I'm going to be spreading that point by 2 inches. If you have a more generous behind, you can spread yours by more, but I've noticed 2 to 2.5 inches is usually enough to cover my my butt and my hip. Now I'm going to be drawing in my center back a slant that goes from that point all the way to the top. And once I have that drawn in place, I know I can trace off the waistline, the side seam, and any other information that I need on my back pattern as well. Don't forget to transfer your dots because that would help to shape the waistline on your body. I'm drawing in the outer edge of my waistline as well. Then for the crouch line on the back, I will be extending it by 1 inch and dropping it by half an inch. This would create more room for your butt when you stand and sit, and I will just allow for easier movement. So I'm just drawing in the back crouch line like this. I realized that I should have actually drawn that line a lot lower. You can see is a little bit higher than my front. It still fit, it still worked, but I feel like I should have drawn it a lot lower. That would have added just a little more ease around my hips and my butt. But now I'm just going in to trace off the side and inner leg, the hemline, transfer the notches, and also add a waist dart for my back pattern. Thankfully, because my front already has a seam allowance added in place, I don't have to think about adding seam allowance after tracing around all the points that I know my back trouser pattern needs. I'm just tracing off the hemline like so. I added a 1 centimeter hem allowance because I'm going to be cutting the main trouser and the lining with the same seam allowance on the hemline. Now the back waist dart is 4 inches long. It's usually slightly shorter because you have to accommodate the curve that your hips and your butt has, which is typically the case on back and front of skirts and trousers. It's usually short, the waist dart is usually shorter on the back. Now once I have that transferred and drawn in, I'm going in here to cut out my back pattern, and these are the patterns I ended up with. I added my grain line, notches, and information on my back pattern that would help me when I'm cutting this by myself or if someone else works with this pattern. Also, I went in to create a pocket bag. This is optional, you do not have to. I just wanted to add pockets. Now this is the typical shape of an inseam pocket, which has like an oblong shape around the bottom to accommodate for your hand when it goes in, and then it is straight-ish on the side because that's the side that usually stitched into the side seam of your garment, in this case a pair of trousers. So now that I have my patterns all done, I'm going to go ahead to pin them onto fabric and cut them out to stitch it all together. So I have pinned down the front and the back of the trouser on my fabric. I literally have just I'll say 2¼ meters of fabric, and it is literally just enough. Like if I had made the pattern even 1 inch longer, the fabric would have not, if not reach. So let me just show you guys what I mean. Folded it in half so it's double, so I can cut 2 of the front and 2 of the back, and then 1 pair of the pocket on this side, and I think I'll cut the other pair on the other side for the pocket. But this is what I mean by if the fabric was just enough, 2 meters, I'll say 2 and just a little bit, because I use a part of this fabric to make a custom purse, which you guys would have seen in the intro of this video, or you will see in the outro of this video. I also like to make a nice cute cord and cool look, but I'm going to cut this out now. I will use the same pattern to cut the lining, and then I'll join all of the pieces together to show the final finished product. With all of my patterns pinned onto fabric, I'm just going in now to cut the main front trouser. I'll need to cut a pair of this, one side for the left and one side for the right. I'll need to cut a pair of the back trouser and 2 pairs of the pocket bag. I'm also going to use the same pattern to cut my lining pieces. You have the freedom to make your lining pieces shorter and then your main piece longer if you don't want to risk your lining showing on the outside of your trouser. Quick progress report. I'm done cutting out all of the parts of the trouser. I have my main front and back here. I have a pair of each in the print. I also use the same pattern to cut the lining. I have my front and back here, pair of each. And then for the pockets, I cut 2 pairs. So a pair would make one side of the pocket bag, 1 pair for the left and 1 pair for the right. Just going to go in to mark and stitch the dots, fix the pocket, join the main piece. And I think my conflict now is if I should add the pocket, if I should add a zip on the side or on the center back. I initially wanted a side zip, but I think I might have to do a center back zip because the pockets are going to be sitting into the side seam of the trouser. But if you don't have any pockets, you can do like a side zip, because side zips are typically easier to, you know, like put on and take off when you have the garment on. But just wanted to update you guys. I'm going to go in now and get into sewing. The first thing I'm going to be doing is transferring the waist darts from the pattern onto the wrong side of the fabric using a pin and then marking the point with a chalk. This I always find the most easy and straightforward way to transfer darts without thinking too much about it. I'm going to transfer darts on both sides of my front and then pin them together along the waist. So like one pin around the waistline, and then you can add another one closer to your point just to hold down the folded dart shape. Now this I'm going to be doing for my front pieces as well as for my back. I'm going to be sewing up the darts and sewing together the front crouch seam. For the back, I'm going to be sewing up the darts, but I'm only going to be sewing the crouch seam halfway, leaving the top half open for my zip to sit into. So ensure that your zip allowance is enough at this point. I'm going to be taking this to my brand new Juki DDL 8700. If you have not seen the unboxing already, please go and watch that video. I can't remember last month I was that excited about anything, but that's the machine I'm going to be working with. I'm going to be sewing up all my points, and once I'm done stitching the darts and the seams on the front and back, I went ahead to press everything nice and flat. So this is the front of my trouser. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go in to add my pocket along the side seam. Now my pocket is going to sit 2.5 inches below my waistline because I want it to be above my hip and not too low. So I'm going to be marking that point with a pin, and then I'm going to grab one side of my pocket bag or pocket facing and pin right sides together of the pocket against that side of the side seam. I'm going to do this for both sides of my front, and I'm going to repeat the same thing on the back panels as well, because you need a pair of the pockets stitched together to actually have a pocket that you can put things and put your hand into. So I'm going to take this in my machine and I'm going to be sewing it up on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, because that's the amount of seam allowance I added. After stitching it like this first, I'm going to go back in again and then open up the pocket stitch situation like this and sew on the inside edge of the seam, like a very narrow edge stitch, just to hold that pocket inside the seam so it does not unfold itself as you wear the garment with time. Once I have all of the pockets stitched on the front and on the back, I am going to join the side seams as well as the inner leg. So I'm just putting right sides together of my front and back pieces in place, and I'm going to be joining the side seams. So the top part of the waist around the pocket, down the side of the pocket. So with one continuous stitch, you join the side seam and you close off the pocket bags. I'm also going to be sewing the inner trouser leg. So by the time I join all of those seams, I have like one piece of trouser to try on and fit. So I'm just going in here to sew the side seam, turning the piece when I get to the point where the pocket is, dropping my footer with the needle inside and then sewing around the pockets. This is right sides together, and I'm sewing on the wrong side of the fabric at this point, sewing around the curves, and then when I reach the edge of the pocket, sew back onto the side seam of the trouser, sewing across the original stitch where you joined your pocket to the trouser along the side, and then turn the piece downwards so you can sew up the entire side seam. This I did for the left and for the right hand side, so I have the pocket stitched in place. Then I also went in to sew and join the entire inner leg of the trouser. I gave the piece a press just to relax all of the stitching, and this is what it's looking like. So I'm going to go in to add the zip to the center back edge. You know that particular side of the back that we left open, that's where I'm going to be adding my zip. I'm adding this short black invisible zip because my lining is black, so I need to blend in very nicely. I'm just pinning the zip to the open edge on the left and on the right hand side, and then open up the zip tape so it's easier to stitch. I found that with invisible zips it's a lot easier to sew when you open up the zip, and that way when you unroll the zip and you stitch that in place, it just makes sewing this a lot more easier. So I'm just sewing this on my domestic machine because that's where I have my invisible zip footer. I'm going to stitch it downwards in this direction for this side of the trouser, and then for the other side I'm going to turn to the other zip tape edge and sew that into the other open end of the center back edge. So I'm just going in here to finish this edge of the zip tape and to check that it zips and fits the way I want it to do. Once I'm happy with all of that, I'm going to set it to the side and join all of my lining pieces in the same order that I join my main pieces. So stitch up the dart, so the inner and outer leg seams, give it a nice press, leaving that top center back edge open for the zip. And this is what my lining panel is looking like, all joined together. I also left an opening on the side. I'll say this is about 5 to 6 inches wide. That would allow me to turn this piece inside out when I'm finishing it up. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to join the waistline of the lining to the main piece with on right sides together. So I'm just going to add some pins on the center front, the side seam, the dart points, and down the zip edge. This way I'll be able to sew from one side around the waistline down the other side to conceal the seam along the waistline of the trouser. I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to be starting from one edge of the zip tape, sewing along this point like so, and when I reach the waistline, leave the needle in, lift up the footer and turn the piece to the waist direction, and then sew around the entire waistline of the piece up until I reach the other center back edge and finish it off. Once that is all done, I'm going to turn this inside out and try to see if it fits all right. Okay, now it's time for a quick fit check to see if I'm happy with everything so far, and this is what the trouser is looking like. Wow, I'm glad I added ease around the thigh and the waist because this is perfection at its finest. It is a little bit loose here, and that's because of the pockets opening on the side. So it's adding some measurements around the tummy, which I honestly don't mind because it means it sort of conceals my food belly. I just had lunch, but this looks really, really, really cute. I'm a short girl, that's why it looks short on me, but that is how high the waist goes. You could have the waist higher or lower. I just like to have my waistlines above my belly button, so I could wear this with a crop top if I wanted, or tuck a blouse in. But this is giving me fella. Is it just me? I don't know why these pants are giving me that fella energy. Comment below if you know who fella is. Repping all the way from Africa, but this is giving me strong fella vibes. But I'm loving. I'm happy so far. So I'm just going to finish the hem with the lining, finish both hems, and show you guys a final look at the end. Can you tell I'm happy? Once I start to dance or something, you know I'm happy. Here is a closer look of what the inside of the trouser is looking like along the waistline. This I am happy with, and I'm going to go ahead to finish off the hem. Now I'm going to be folding the edges inwards like this and then pinning them in place because that's how I want them to be stitched down. And once I pin the outer and the inner edges, you know that opening that we left on the inside on one of the legs, I'm going to turn the trouser inside out so I am able to sew with right sides together the hemline of the lining to the hemline of the trouser. This way I'm able to have a nice finished edge along the bottom of the trouser, and once I'm done I can finish up the opening that I left on the side. So I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to be sewing both trouser legs, so this side first, and then I'm going to work on the other side. I stitched on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and then once I was done doing that, I pulled the entire trouser outside. So I have the lining on the inside of the trouser and the main trouser piece on the outer shell. This is what the inside of the trouser is looking like, nice and tidy and clean. And then I'm going to take this side that I left open to my machine, and I'm going to be sewing that close, so that way I have a nice and beautiful finish on the outside and on the inside of my piece. Result looks like. I love the fit of this trouser. It's a little bit snug on my thighs. I do have quite full thighs, so just be mindful of that if you are creating yours as well. You can add a little bit more ease if your fabric does not have stretch like this. But I hope you guys enjoyed watching this project. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to tag me on social media at Kim Dave Designs if you'll be recreating this as well. The custom purse here is by Ebony Cross Handmade. She made this for me custom, and the finish, the quality on this piece is just insane. It paired really well with the trouser and the blouse. The whole look just came together really nicely. I'm going to leave links to her Instagram and her online store down below, so you can check her out as well. I'm also going to be linking Jennifer's project down below. She decided to create a pair of jogger trousers, which I think looked really cool. So we use the same fabric, but she did a slightly different trouser style. As I mentioned earlier on in this video, she styled hers in a casual way, kind of similar to how I did mine. So with trainers, matching top, and then she used a bit of her fabric to make a little headband. The trouser has an elasticated waistband and cuffs, and I'm going to be linking her Instagram and her YouTube channel, so check out her own tutorial as well. I love how this turned out. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon and evening wherever you are. Bye.
You and I, we fight sometimes. I just want us to survive. We can scream and shout, but I know just what you want. You know just what